Welcome to FANSPLAINED, media criticism podcast with Ryan and M. I'm Ryan.
And I'm M.
And we're starting off our analysis of popular fandom media with a deep dive series into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or the MCU. Over the next many weeks, we'll be rewatching or watching for the first time, in some cases, usually mine, each component of the MCU and the extended multiverse.
I mean, I'm not up to date on all of the shows either, so some of those are going to be a first for me.
Okay. In this episode, we're looking at Captain America, the First Avenger. Released in the summer of 2011, this is actually the fifth release in what is called Phase 1 of the MCU. However, we plan on tackling the MCU in chronological order where we can. It gets complicated. And since the bulk of the First Avenger spans from 1942 to 1944 or 45, depends on which source you're looking at, we place it first chronologically. Like this film, where an MCU entry has flashbacks or forward flashes, there are both in many different films, we will default to the setting used in most of the film. With television entries that span across multiple parts of the timeline, we'll address each season where it ends off instead of breaking each episode into the timeline. So we're not going to be doing each episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. where exactly it fits into the timeline, because that would be crazy.
It would also drive us insane in order to do it that way.
Yes, it would. So, Captain America the First Avenger was produced by Marvel Studios and was initially distributed by Paramount Pictures, though Disney has since internalized their own distribution rights to all their MCU films that are not currently part of a joint venture like Sony and the current Spider-Verse.
Basically, once they started making a lot of money, they wanted everything back under their own umbrella.
Yes.
No sharing with anybody else.
No sharing. No more. Not unless we have to. This film was one of the first releases after Disney's acquisition of Marvel Entertainment and all of the Marvel subsidiary companies. At the end of 2009, it was literally the last day of 2009, and the beginning of 2010. So we're going to begin with some of the production trivia and the influences on the film, including those beyond the MCU. Some of this will include the history of the MCU as a concept, though we'll get into some of that with other Phase 1 films as well.
Basically, whichever facts are applicable to whichever movie.
Exactly. As well as release details and early development. So, did you have anything you wanted to hit on that first?
Yes, actually. The film, directed by Joe Johnston, he started with Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, something that I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with, in 1989. And going through his whole filmography, he not only started working with Disney, he's had a very long history working with Disney. He's had a long history of making action films, sci-fi, fantasy, action-adventure films. He, aside from Captain America, he did Jumanji, Jurassic Park 3, October Sky, The Rocketeer, which is also a Disney movie, the Nutcracker and the Four Realms, which is something
we don't talk about this film.
It
doesn't exist.
I really don't want to talk about that film or even think about it.
We don't have to.
The Wolfman, which came out the year before Captain America, the one with Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins in it. And looking at the opening of the film, you can actually see a lot of the similar visuals to it, like the dark dankness of Europe, basically.
Yeah, when they're in Norway.
Especially the interior where we see not Walder Frey.
Yes, not Walder Frey. No red wedding for Captain America.
No, he is the one who is stabbed. As he should.
Spoilers, by the way. We will talk about a lot of spoilers.
We trust me, just wait until we actually get to Game of Thrones. That's gonna be a whole thing right there. He also directed Hidalgo, The Page Master, which,
Who remembers that? No one.
I do, only because I watched it as a kid, and I have very mixed feelings about those memories I have of that movie. I can certainly say that. He was also slated to direct the sequel or the next installment of the Narnia series, The Silver Chair, which I know you are very...
I'm very love-hate with the Narnia films because they can get very tedious, but I'm absolutely here for Ben Barnes, and I will always be here for Ben Barnes.
Mr. Benjamin Barnes.
Mr. Benjamin Barnes.
Unfortunately, though, it has been in production hell for many years. There's really no release date on it, so we have no idea if it'll ever see the light of day.
Disney's never really decided what they wanted to do with the Narnia series, so
No.
that really doesn't surprise me too much. It surprises me more that they're even actively considering production on a fourth Narnia film.
I mean, I'm surprised that it still even looks like it is on the table at this point.
Right?
Because it's like when I can't even remember how well or how bad the last one did.
Not well, because a lot of people do not remember that the Dawn Treader was a thing, despite how good Ben Barnes looks in it.
No, they just remember Prince Caspian because they were like,
Okay, but he looked great in that too. Fair.
That's why they remember that one.
Dawn Treader also, was missing half the cast.
Yeah, it was.
So it doesn't help that you're missing half the cast.
I mean,
Susan's
it also,
actress was too busy doing Rain.
It also doesn't help that, you're telling a lot of this book series out of order.
Right. Right. You are.
Technically, you are.
Oh, we'll get to that if we ever do Narnia.
If they have... Well, I guess we could cover the 3 movies instead of... I don't even know. Maybe by the time we get to it, they'll
have the 4th one out? Yeah. It'll take us a long time to get through Marvel.
And one more bit of trivia about the director is that he was in 2 Star Wars films, also connecting him back around to Disney.
What do you mean he was in 2 Star Wars films?
He was in Star Wars A New Hope as a Death Star Trooper, uncredited. And he was also in The Empire Strikes Back as Captain Sean Valdez, Hoth Rebel, also uncredited.
Well, if I remember correctly, Johnston also did design work on the original trilogy, so that's probably them shoehorning a little cameo in there.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Like Marvel does for their directors and
if you know
some of their writers.
If you know what he looks like, you'd probably be able to spot him in there.
Yeah. Well, there's another production story with Captain America.
Oh, goody.
It goes on for quite a while. Buckle up. So the original Captain America, or the original concept for the movie was actually developed around 1997. They've been talking about doing Captain America since 97. It took them until 2011 to release it.
I mean, they did technically have another Captain America movie that we don't really
talk about that movie. By May 2000, Marvel had teamed up with Artisan Entertainment, and this is the company that's responsible for the Blair Witch. They were really into a lot of indie films. I think that they've been since subsumed by another company. I do not remember what it is. Put a pin in that. To help them finance it, and this was back in the era of Marvel's bankruptcy, so they had no money. They were auctioning off their properties left and right to
which is why they
could give them the money basically to
that's
finance
why they ended
whatever.
up being spread all over the board with all these different studios, was because they literally couldn't afford to keep them.
Yeah.
Or more like they couldn't afford to make movies on them, so they sold them off so they could get some of that revenue back.
Yeah. Well, if I remember correctly, Marvel actually prepared to license the Captain America film rights, and there were a whole slew of problems before this, and I'll get back to that. But they actually prepared to license the film rights to Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers. Before they decided to produce all of, the MCU themselves.
Oh, how the turntables.
Oh, how the turntables, indeed. So, back in 2000, when they teamed up with Artisan, this initial attempt at a Captain America movie was delayed by a lawsuit between Marvel and Joe Simon, who is the original writer of Captain America, over copyright ownership. And Joe Simon has a storied history with Marvel not paying him the money that he deserves for things. So Joe Simon and Jack Kirby created Captain America in 1940. They depicted Cap punching Hitler in the jaw well ahead of Pearl Harbor.
Which is a good thing.
Yes, exactly. After the first issue, Simon even asked Kirby to join the Timely staff, and Timely is the company that became Marvel Comics, basically, as an art director. However, even then, Simon had a storied history with pay at Marvel and felt that Timely Comics was not paying both him and Kirby their promised percentage of their profits, and so secretly they moonlit? Is that what the term is for when you have, like, a secret second job?
Yeah, you're moonlighting.
Yeah. They moonlit secretly at National Comics, which actually became DC Comics, which is owned by Warner Brothers.
Oh my
But
God.
this is also why you have Jack Kirby making all of these, like, comics properties that end up being extremely similar across both DC and Marvel, like the Eternals and New Gods, I think is what it is. We'll get to that when we get to the Eternals well down the line. The lawsuit was settled in 2003, and then Marvel did the stuff with Warner Brothers and then decided to do it themselves. Captain Marvel was involved as one of the 10 films that Marvel made a deal with Merrill Lynch for. They wanted a $525 million investment over 10 films. Captain America was one of them. Iron Man was one of them. Black Panther was originally one of them, but obviously it took them way too long to do that, and they weren't on Merrill Lynch's dime anymore at that point.
Nope.
Because this was well pre-Disney. David Maisel, who was originally what was he? He was hired as the Marvel Studios president in 2003. He is responsible for pitching the self-funded films to Avi Arad, who is the Marvel Studios CEO at the time. He is not currently, but he was at the time. And Perlmutter, who was the Marvel CEO, is not currently the Marvel CEO. We'll get into that later, too.
Thank God.
As part of a connected cinematic universe. So he's the one that basically concepted the MCU as a CU. Basically.
I thought that was Kevin Feige.
He helped.
He
helped, but Maisel was the one that was going after all the funding and trying to pitch it to people.
Oh.
He was, like, on the producer end, and Feige was on the creative end. At least the way that I understand that. I could be wrong. Somebody can correct me. Could absolutely be wrong on that, but this is the way I understood it. So, in doing this, Maisel was hired as the Marvel Studios president in 2003. He was promoted to vice chairman of Marvel Studios in 2005, and was elevated to the office of CEO of Marvel Entertainment in 2006. And this is all, again, before Iron Man has even come out, and they can even prove that it's good.
They really did, were like, you know what, we should just... Actually, it reminds me of the, what was it, that thing Universal was trying to do, the Dark Universe or something, where they were going to reboot all of their Universal monsters to make their own cinematic universe.
Yeah, they did try to do that. That's what part of the Wolfman was, which, ironically, Johnston worked on.
Yep. I actually liked the Wolfman.
Wasn't that part of what Van Helsing was supposed to be originally, too, and it just did not connect very well?
I don't even know about Van Helsing.
Because they didn't remake a Dracula, and they probably should have, but he showed up in Van Helsing.
Yeah, with a fucking lisp.
Oh, swear words.
Language! Don't even start that with me.
No, we're 15 minutes in, we're fine.
I'm just... Van Helsing, I liked Hugh Jackman in it. I didn't like much else. Let's just say that.
We're not here to talk about Van Helsing, thank God.
Thank God.
It's similar, and Maisel is actually responsible for concepting a lot of shared universes that don't get off the ground. So he's really lucky that Marvel really worked.
Yeah.
Because
he's very lucky it worked.
Did I write it down, or did I just read it? He was responsible for concepting one for Aspen Comics, where they were going to make, like, an animated Cupid movie with Justin Bieber, and he was doing this with Scooter Braun, who is the guy who owns all of Taylor Swift's music and is the reason why we're getting all the re-records.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also in charge of Justin Bieber's music.
Oh, God.
So, we were going to get an animated Cupid movie as part of this mythoverse or mythosverse or whatever in the heck it was called. It obviously didn't happen. If you even look at the website for this shared universe / company, it doesn't exist anymore. The website just points to nothing. It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist, just like the concept of this.
It was as of 2018 and they just stopped, I guess. I don't know. But we'll get to that in Eternals too, because I am avoiding spoilers for that right now. But this isn't the first time that he's been in charge of, well, it was the first time he was in charge of a cinematic universe, but he tries to recreate it in other places and it doesn't work out for him.
To say the least.
Basically.
He's incredibly fortunate this one actually worked out as well as it did, because, my God, when you go into all the production, behind-the-scenes stuff, they really took a major gamble on a lot of this. Especially with how the previous Hulk movie did, with how the previous other Marvel iterations had done. Some hit, a lot of misses. They were really just going out there to, like, the end of the plank and be like, you
praying.
know what? Maybe we'll float.
Praying. Yeah, because the only comic book movies that had really been all that successful to that point were, like, X-Men, and even that had a serious flub at the end of the trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm coming up blank. I know there's another one. There had to have been another one.
The Blade trilogy.
The Blade did okay. I think the Superman stuff had done okay. Batman had obviously done okay, but you get, like, very up and down results with all of those.
I think it was Christopher Nolan's Batman that probably really helped spur it on, because Iron Man came out around the same time as The Dark Knight did. So Batman Begins had already come out, already been as successful as it was. You had X-Men, you had at least the first two Blade movies that were pretty well received. The third one seems to have kind of mixed feelings on. I think, I don't know, maybe the first Fantastic Four one?
Yeah, but those didn't do that well.
Well, I mean, the first Fantastic Four probably did a little better than the second one.
Well, yes, but neither of them did that well. Spider-Man, that's what it was. It was Spider-Man's that did really well.
How could we
I don't know how that just went right over my head. It was Spider-Man.
Yeah, the Sam Raimi. Well, at least the first two. The third, we don't.
The third, we don't. We'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
Because we will be doing the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. We will be doing the Amazing Spider-Man duology. We will get there in a specific way.
Yes.
Because we've already plotted out a lot of these and how we're going to get to them and when we're going to get to them. So.
Yes, exactly. So in 2007, Maisel was then promoted to Marvel Studios chairman in place of Avi Arad, who had left at this point, again, before Iron Man had come out. He had creative differences with the vision of, like, Maisel and Feige about the cinematic universe connectedness of it, if I remember correctly. Something to do with all that. We'll go over that when we get to Iron Man, because that's really where all of that is important.
Yeah.
But Arad basically left, and then Maisel took Arad's place. Feige took creative control of basically the MCU. That's still what he does, but he's basically the COO/chairman. He's basically in Arad's place now, but with creative control.
Yeah.
That's basically where he is now. And so Maisel also saw the launch of the MCU with Iron Man in 2008, which was 3 years before this. I can do math. And then he was also responsible for arranging the sale of Marvel to Disney for $4 billion in 2009. And then I haven't found a whole lot on him since then, so I assume that is basically when he, like, exited, is when Disney took
over
full control over Marvel. And then there are some other fun tidbits, but unrelated to the creation of the MCU. Jon Favreau approached Avi Arad to direct Captain America as a comedy, but then instead signed on to Iron Man, and I think we're all very thankful for that, because Iron Man works very solidly as a comedy.
Yes.
This one would not have worked quite so well if it was all comedy and not just the little tidbits we get in there before Joss Whedon overtakes everything, and we'll get to that later. I'm not going to talk about it today because we'll be here for 3 hours. And then you get more development hell problems with Captain America. It was put on hold again in 2007 to 2008, which is why it did not come out as early as they wanted it to, because of the Writers Guild of America strike that paused everything, basically.
Yeah.
Marvel reached an agreement with the Writers Guild to get back to work in January of 2008. And then that's why we get Iron Man, because it was further down the pipeline. And Cap leads us into Avengers instead.
Yes.
There are also funny notes, like Louis Leterrier. I think that is how you say his name. I am so sorry if that is not how you say his name.
It's French.
He is the director of The Incredible Hulk, and he liked the concept art and the look of Captain America so much that he went to Marvel and he offered his services, and they turned him down. I can't imagine why.
He's also the director of at least the first 2 Transporter films, if that is any indication of his ability.
I'd say that the Hulk really speaks for itself. Which we'll get to.
Yeah, we will get to that.
But it kind of speaks for itself. Let's see. So Johnston was signed to direct in November of 2008, and he was the one who hired Christopher Marcus and... oh gosh, I lost the name. Stephen McFeely as writers they were basically rewriting it because this movie had been in so much pre-production and development.
They also, he also worked on the Chronicles of Narnia too, actually.
Did he?
Yeah, McFeely.
Yeah, Marcus and McFeely have basically written, their entire careers have been like symbiotic with each other.
Yes.
So they have done everything together, even non-MCU, non-Disney stuff as far as I could tell, but they're responsible for all 3 Chronicles of Narnia movies. They're responsible for all 3 Captain America movies. They concepted and are given creator credits on Agent Carter, and both wrote the pilot episode. And they are also both responsible for Infinity War and Endgame, as well as Thor: The Dark World, which, again, we'll get to.
I think that's mostly... for Infinity War, and Endgame especially, I think it's because they reused a lot of
the
scenes.
Concept and the... yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because, again, we'll get there. We're not going to spoil that now. We don't want to get into it. Johnston reportedly was chosen for his work on October Sky, The Rocketeer, and his work on the original Star Wars trilogy, which, again, I think was the design end of it. Not his cameo acting.
His uncredited acting stint.
And then they also... scroll down for me real quick. Okay. They also cite Raiders of the Lost Ark as an influence because they did not, quote, want it to feel like a period piece.
Even though it's literally a period piece.
We will get to that when we get to the design and everything of the movie.
And
but
the influences of it. Because there's quite a bit of similarities between Captain America, First Avenger, and Raiders of the Lost Ark, as well as The Rocketeer.
They definitely changed their minds on what they wanted to do with Captain America several times. Originally, it was supposed to only be half in the 1940s, and half of it was supposed to be, like, Avengers era modern day. I don't think it would have worked as well.
It would not have worked nearly as well as it did with the end product. I feel like it's taking... and staying in the 1940s as long as it did for the bulk of the movie is exactly what needed to happen. And then when it ends with the modern reveal, that I think is the real, genuine gut punch that his story really deserves and needs, frankly.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we should also quickly go over exactly what Captain America, the First Avenger is even about. I'm not going to read Disney's summary of this. We kind of wrote our own, so you don't have to suffer through whatever it says on Disney+. Captain America is a mostly standalone story of Steve Rogers, a scrawny and sickly kid from 1940s Brooklyn with a laundry list of physical ailments and disabilities. Despite this, Rogers is still eager, if not a little desperate, to join the Army and the U.S. war effort in World War II. By this point, I think it's 1943. I think they show that, so that's...
Yeah.
Makes sense. Alone in the world, aside from his best friend, Bucky Barnes, Rogers goes against all warnings, including those of Barnes, and continues to attempt to enlist under falsified identities. He's done this at least a dozen times.
I think in the movie they quoted like 4 or 5 times that he's done this.
It wouldn't surprise me if it was upwards of 10, 12. He continues to do it, just finding new places to say where he's from, finding different people to cite as family, probably, whatever, but he always seems to have the same physical doctor records. Steve, if you're gonna fake an identity, maybe fake a good identity.
Yeah, instead of carrying your laundry list of ailments with you.
Maybe fake Bucky's identity. He actually probably would mind, but just fake Bucky's identity, it's fine. Inevitably discovered, because of course it is, Rogers' tenacity affords him a rare opportunity from a turncoat ex-German scientist, Abraham Erskine, who is now working with the U.S. as part of the Strategic Science Reserve, which I think is fake. Pretty sure it's fake. This is basically what becomes S.H.I.E.L.D. in the later MCU. It's the secret science arm of the U.S. military at this point. So Erskine introduces Rogers to a potentially fatal, but also potentially life-altering experiment to undergo the injection of a serum created to make super soldiers, and you can't see it, but I'm doing that in quotes, super soldiers. This secret experiment is in high demand, including by Erskine's former patron, although I'm not sure you'd call it patron as much as employer, forced employer.
Forced employer works a lot better.
Forced employer, and failed test subject, Johann Schmidt, who is also the Red Skull. Spoilers, he's also the Red Skull.
Is it really a failure, though, that when
he's not Steve, of course it's a failure.
He essentially got what he wanted.
But he didn't, because he didn't have a face anymore.
You might say his face off. Face off.
There is no Nick Cage in this movie.
Well, not yet anyway.
And Johann Schmidt was a once close confidant of Adolf Hitler and is now the head of a rogue Nazi science division, Hydra. And at this point, it's very heavily implied that Hydra is divested from the Nazis because the Nazis think they're too crazy to be Nazis.
They're basically the Puritans of Nazis. I'm
not into his whole Aryan mindset. Okay, Johann, that's fine, but you're still a Nazi.
I'm not into all of that. I just want to be God. That's all.
I just want to be Loki. It's fine. Everything's fine. And he is wildly obsessed with Norse myth, as most Nazis were at the time. Schmidt has larger plans, however, and Rogers' only hope is that the experiment has been refined since its first iteration. Because again, Steve wants to keep his face. Rogers is left to navigate his place in the war, as well as new abilities, and shall we even say, great power, cough, cough,
and greater
that few are ever given.
And greater responsibilities that come with that great power.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, because Erskine gives him the Uncle Ben speech, and then he
dies.
Every time you give somebody the Uncle Ben speech, I swear to God, this is more of a Spider-Man movie than Spider-Man Homecoming, which I'll get to when we get to Homecoming.
Ooh.
But this was more of a Spider-Man movie than most of MCU Spider-Man was.
Oh.
I'm not sorry.
Look at Thor here throwing the hammer down.
Hulk smash. I Hulk smashed. I Hulk smashed. We haven't gotten to that either.
No, but we will.
Yes. The Captain America. Stars Chris Evans, Haley Atwell, Sebastian Stan, Tommy Lee Jones, Hugo Weaving, Stanley Tucci, Dominic Cooper, Neil McDonough. I think that's how you say that. Again, I am really bad at pronouncing names, I'm sorry.
He was in Band of Brothers, for those who need to know.
Derek Luke, and a whole slew of other people. And then it also boasts cameos from people such as Samuel L. Jackson, who's reprising his role as Nick Fury from earlier MCU releases, even though this is the first in the chronology.
Yes.
Jenna Coleman of Doctor Who fame, she's literally just dating Bucky Barnes for about 10 minutes. Richard Armitage, who I really wish they'd bring back in a meteor role, but I don't know if they can do that because he was such a... I don't want to say iconic bad guy, because he wasn't really iconic, but he made a presence on screen.
He had gravitas.
Yes.
That's what you're looking for.
Yes, he had gravitas, and I just wish they hadn't wasted Richard Armitage on this.
Well, I mean, they've recast other people in there, so there is hope.
There's hope. I'm just kind of glad that they didn't use Jeff Goldblum the way that they originally wanted to use Jeff Goldblum as the senator who's taken Steve around to all his USO shows.
Can you imagine his delivery on those things? Well, maybe just, go out there and do a little dance, do a little song,
I'm still so glad we got him in Thor instead,
because life finds a way, Steve.
Life finds a way. Pulls open his shirt a little bit. Steve, just give him a little bit of this.
Give him a little... that American gusto.
Oh, God.
Grit holds his shoulder while he says it.
I hate it. It also has Natalie Dormer before Game of Thrones controlled her entire life for several years. As well as Stan Lee. This is when we still had poor Stan, so we could still have Stan cameos, and that was great.
I'm gonna get emotional at every cameo he does from here on out. It's official.
And Laura Haddock, who is basically one of the girls looking for an autograph during one of those USO show spots. And this is only notable not because people are going to go, oh yeah, Laura Haddock, I've heard of her, even though she might be in stuff. I don't know enough about her. No offense to her, actually. But it's notable because... she is actually cast as Peter Quill's mother in James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy.
See, that's why I mean there's hope for Richard Armitage to return.
Except that he had a meteor role than Laura Haddock did. But then you could compare it to Gemma Chan, who had a pretty significant role in Captain Marvel, and then ends up being the lead in the Eternals.
Yeah, as Cersei.
Yeah. The irony when we were just talking about Game of Thrones.
we can't escape Game of Thrones.
Well, no, you can't when you put...
basically,
when you put Richard in a movie with a girl named Cersei. You can't.
And Jon Snow.
Yeah, she's dating both of them.
Yeah. And then Jon Snow's gonna go off to be the Black Knight after he was literally on the Night's Watch.
Taking the black.
Anyway,
so...
This is what happens when you basically make a cinematic universe that's so big that you're pulling so many actors from so many other franchises that they're all eventually gonna meet here in the MCU.
We have well hit the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, and we hit that before Kevin Bacon was even in First Class to make a joke about it. That's basically what happens, is your cinematic universe is so big now that you can't not have weird crossovers with all of your actors now. Mm-hmm. But it's been joked about, and I'll probably talk about this again when we get to Guardians of the Galaxy, but it's been joked about by James Gunn that Laura Haddock's cameo, when she wasn't a cameo originally, she was an extra.
Yeah, she was an extra.
She's been jokingly referred to as Peter Quill's grandmother, to fit that into the cinematic explanation as to why she looks the same.
Yeah.
Which I'll buy.
I will buy that.
It makes sense. It doesn't affect the story. It doesn't overshadow anything.
Yeah.
We'll get to the other one.
I buy that more than the other one that was floated a while ago by Tom Holland.
Yeah, no, we'll get to that. So now we'd want to talk about the acting, what you liked, what you don't, what you wanted to see more of but didn't get, kind of like Jeff Goldblum.
First off, I want to I do want to start with Tommy Lee Jones just because I think he actually really enjoyed this role. I also loved that he got to eat a steak on camera again, which I'm starting to feel like is in his contract that he gets to eat on camera in every movie he's in now.
Kevin, I will only do this if I get a steak.
Yes. He just sits there. Yeah. I'm just gonna eat this right here in front of you. And tell you about all the bad shit that's gonna happen to you if you don't cooperate with us. The steak's good. You sure you don't want any?
I was really ready to write him off at the beginning because he's very... It opens and he's very token, mean guy, army general, doesn't take any shit, doesn't really have a character, he's just here to be mean and make fun of the little guy, whatever.
Yeah.
But they actually managed to give him a pretty solid personality.
Yeah.
You actually get to see him care about people, even if he doesn't want to outwardly show any of that.
He's a gruff, tired general that's in this world war that's honestly trying to do the best that he can, but at the same time, you see him give the chances that he does. He's lenient when he wants to be or feels that, you know, the situation calls for it. Like, despite Steve breaking orders to go behind enemy lines, he's like, nah, it's okay. You actually did a really good job. I'm gonna let this pass.
Well, that, and he works directly with Peggy, which is a thing that I think a lot of, like, gruff army dudes would not be chill with. Not only is she a woman in that higher place of power, but she's British.
She is British, but also she's literally there training the men in this,
They're in the experiment, basically.
Yeah,
They're in the super soldier program to see who's gonna
in the program.
get stabbed
just
the way that Steve
I
does.
just had a brain fart.
It's okay.
She's literally there training his soldiers in this program personally. Even punched one of them, knocked him into the ground. He's like, get your ass out of that dirt. Stand up in line and wait for someone to tell you what to do.
Exactly. He doesn't yell at Peggy. He yells at the guy. It's very different.
I feel like he has a lot of respect for Peggy. Even when he kind of gives her a hard time later on, I think he genuinely respects her. And that is not something you see in a lot of, honestly, World War II movies in general, actually, let alone a comic book movie where most of the cast is primarily comprised of dudes.
A good majority of it, yeah.
Yeah, she's pretty much the only woman that's...
She's the only leading woman
in the cast. And she holds her own very effectively.
Yes.
I mean, it goes without saying I love Haley Atwell as Peggy Carter. I love her all throughout this movie. I think it...
You love Haley Atwell when she's not Peggy Carter.
Yes, that too. She's a very... What's the best way to describe it? I think she kicks ass in everything she does. Even if it's a supporting role, I think she always nails it. Even if the movie sucks, I think she nails it. And I really wish she would get more roles. But I especially like her being Peggy. I especially like her holding a machine gun and just, you know, laying waste to not Nazis everywhere. I enjoy her tenacity. I enjoy all of her comebacks. I enjoy the fact she literally got a fucking headshot to a dude in a moving car. Just
right.
Like, damn, Peggy, do it again.
Please step on me, ma'am.
Yes,
thank
please.
you.
I mean, I was trying to be more respectful about it, but yes, I also very much appreciate how she looks.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. That's fair.
I very much appreciate how she does actually walk in heels and steps on everyone in her vicinity.
I would not walk in heels that well.
No. She is an absolute pro at it. And also, the scene in the red dress, literally everyone stops to gawk, to stare, to be in awe of her presence. And then Bucky gets completely
annihilated. Annihilated.
He doesn't take it too well.
Finish him.
Just finish him. She just strolls right out. I'm like, and you got dressed for what exactly?
You see, this is why Bucky had to, quote, die. She annihilated his ass. just annihilated him. He had to leave from sheer embarrassment. He fell off that train because he was just so ashamed of Peggy just stomping all over his ego.
He didn't die, he was already dead.
Just beating on a corpse already. Just beating on a corpse, Hydra. Come on. Not nice.
I loved the Howling Commandos. I thought
They're all so cute.
They were very cute. I love how well they all worked off of each other. I thought the whole dynamic was perfect. Also, it matched... I appreciate how much it actually matched all the different kind of soldiers that there were in World War II.
Yeah, the Howling Commandos are extremely diverse, especially for an early Marvel movie, and especially for a World War II movie.
Because I don't think this movie was really trying to be progressive or inclusive. It literally, it had a black soldier, had an Asian soldier, it had all of... It was comprised of all the different kinds of soldiers that really were on the U.S.'s side during World War II, and I appreciated that.
Aside from Russians, but does Bucky count?
No, Bucky doesn't count. He's American. He's a fake Russian.
Okay. So, aside from Russians, because you have a French guy, you have a British guy, you have the American guy, and then you have your black guy and your Asian American guy. Right.
Yes. Because Asians were, the Japanese Americans specifically, were allowed to fight.
Alright, so you're also missing your Canadians?
Oh, I'm sure they were in there somewhere.
Just not the Howling Commandos.
Canada was represented at some point.
Canada.
Canadian. The Canadias.
I would also like to shout out Hugo Weaving in this movie.
Who I continue to forget is Australian because he does so many accents in every movie he does. He has done American, British, German, Elvish.
The first time I watched it, I think it took me a while to actually recognize that it was Mr. Anderson. You know, like, I think it took me a while to recognize, I'm like, oh, that's Elrond.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Because to that point, I had not watched The Matrix yet. I'm ashamed, I know.
She has watched The Matrix.
I have since, it's fine.
Yes.
Have since, hadn't at the time. It took me years because I sometimes get to that point where some hype gets to the point where I'm like, stop talking about it and then I'll watch it.
Yeah.
But not always.
And then
because Marvel hype doesn't quite get to me that way.
And then other times, you know, time just gets away from you and you get busy and you're like, oh, I'll get to it eventually.
Yeah, exactly. But his acting within the heavy prosthetics where you can still tell it's him and they haven't had to do so much CGI editing on his face that you completely miss his face. When you could have. If you were making the Red Skull and if it had been like current Marvel where everything is CG and everything is blue screened.
Yes.
Why even get Hugo Weaving at that point? Because would you have even recognized it as Hugo Weaving? Probably not.
I mean, this is also another credit to Johnston, who has a history of, you know, trying to actually rely more on practical effects than special effects. I mean, of course, there is CGI in a lot of his later work, but he does have a lot of practical in there.
Well, this is one of those that actually tries to hit very realistic special effects from small Steve upward, really.
Also, Hugo Weaving did work with Johnston before because he was in The Wolfman, too. I just remembered that.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, he was like the inspector in that one.
Yeah. And then you have Stanley Tucci as Abraham Erskine. I thought his German accent was actually pretty believable for the most part.
And I really liked his character. I was actually... Every time...
I'm very lucky I saw this before the Hunger Games.
I, on the other hand, did imagine... Can you imagine him walking through those curtains with that blue wig on? Oh, and Mr. Rogers!
No, because that would be wildly uncanny. Too much. Current Steve? Yeah, sure. Might be able to buy that.
Yeah.
40s Steve? No, that would have been beyond the pale.
Well, that's part
What is this, surprise on Mephisto?
Well, that's part of the hilarity, honestly. But I mean, I actually, every time I've watched this movie, I always get sad when Stanley Tucci dies.
It's because he's basically Uncle Ben!
He's a very, I mean, aside from the Uncle Ben parallel, he is a very good character. He has respect for pretty much most people, especially Steve.
He's Steve's missing dad.
Oh, how dare you.
In the same regiment, you're welcome!
How dare you.
He's Steve's replacement dad.
Oh,
That's why he's Uncle Ben, because Uncle Ben is Peter's replacement dad.
That's really upsetting, actually.
You're welcome! Tommy Lee Jones' other replacement dad, though, so it's okay.
It's more, actually, I think Tommy Lee Jones is probably his more gruff grandpa.
I mean, that's fair, too. That's fair, too.
Like, look at how skinny he is. He's making me cry.
Making me cry.
Get some meat on your bones, boy.
And then you have Dominic Cooper as Howard Stark, who we actually see first in Iron Man. But since we're doing this chronologically, this is our, quote, first exposure to Howard Stark.
We get young, sexy Howard Stark, who doesn't know how to complete his inventions successfully. Well, not all of them. He embarrassed himself quite efficiently at the fair. What was it, the World?
It's not a World's Fair because it's like the Stark Expo.
Oh, it's the
But it's basically
Stark
the
Expo?
same thing. Because, and you come to that, because Johnston has done this in other films.
He has.
Because he's done the World's Fair in Rocketeer.
He did.
And Howard Stark is basically the same character
as Terry O'Quinn in The Rocketeer.
Yeah, who played Howard Hughes.
He even looks like Terry O'Quinn in The Rocketeer. You don't believe me? Look it up.
But also so does older Howard Stark.
He did.
But this is because I have a theory, because Disney is obsessed with this Tomorrowland thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Thanks to Disney himself.
Yeah, you see it in Disneyland, you see it in Tomorrowland, you see it in The Rocketeer, you see it all over Disney, basically. I have a theory that Howard Stark, or Howard Hughes, who is not really Howard Hughes.
No, because the historical Howard Hughes was, I guess you could say he was pretty charismatic early in his career. He made Wings of Honor. He was a well-known pilot, designer, and filmmaker. And however, his mental illness was pretty crippling after a point, and he became a bit of a shut-in. He also had pretty severe OCD. Like, he is like Howard Stark and the Howard Hughes in The Rocketeer they are not reflective of the actual historical Howard Hughes, sadly.
No, but they're basically the same character from The Rocketeer to Captain America.
Pretty much, which The Rocketeer was based on a graphic novel too, so it technically does count as a comic book movie.
But it also lends into my theory, overall, if you compare the Howard Hughes to Howard Stark as the same character, and then bring it back around to the guy you see in Iron Man, I would say they're actually a pretty good metaphor for Walt Disney himself.
Ooh.
You have the massive inventor who's obsessed with this very specific Art Deco Futureland aesthetic thing, who looks a specific way. In all of those movies, they all look the same, and they all kind of look a little bit like Walt Disney.
They kind of do, really.
I don't think that it's, like, very pointed. At least it's not a thing that you're supposed to pick up on, but that's kind of how I feel. But I also feel like Howard Stark is at least, at minimum, basically just the Howard Hughes character that Johnston's done before.
Yeah, I think so. And then I guess Disney liked it so much they just ran with it and kept it going.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll get to that when we do Iron Man 2 and the changes in Howard's character from here to...
Yeah.
2010, I think, is when Iron Man is technically set.
Because he also makes an appearance in Agent Carter Season 1.
Yes. As well as the one shot. He's in that as well. Okay.
Sebastian Stan.
Yeah, Seb
Stan. The one and only. He, I think, does a pretty good job as an introduction to Bucky Barnes as a character. We really don't get a full, solid characterization on Bucky until Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But the fact that he has not only stuck with this character for this many years, but I think did a pretty good job of illustrating the relationship he has with Steve, the kind of dude he was in the 40s. I think Substan did a pretty good job with that. He had his own presence, but he did not overshadow Chris Evans at all, which...
Well, and he didn't feel like that really annoying token sidekick who's just kind of... like Robin and Batman and Robin. No, he does not feel like that Robin.
He did not. And I also really appreciate how we get to see how he was a sniper in the 40s. He was a sniper in the World War.
Sniping all of Steve's dates!
I mean, it's true. He
tried. He tried and he failed, and then he died because Peggy killed him.
He failed the one time. He succeeded all the other times, but he failed that one time.
Yet he won with Jenna Coleman, and he lost with Haley Atwell, and that's why Bucky Barnes had to die.
Yeah, that's why he had to die.
Yep.
And then he got a metal arm.
Yes.
Because...
But for all our intents and purposes in Captain America, he's dead.
Yes,
he's dead. We don't know that he's not dead, so he's dead.
We don't know. At the time Captain America came out, and then Avengers followed, we had no idea when Bucky was going to come back, if he was going to come back. I feel like the only people who did know were people who were into the comics and knew about that whole storyline. Otherwise, to every other audience member, he was dead.
And to that point, I actually think that for the most part, getting off the acting and into the film itself, for the most part, Captain America, the First Avenger, I always screw the title up.
We didn't talk about Chris Evans, though.
We'll get back to Chris Evans. We'll get back to Chris Evans.
We need to give Cap his props.
We will. But I feel like this movie stands alone for the most part up until you get to the ending.
Yeah.
Where it leads into a very dated teaser trailer for the Avengers that I don't think would be cut that way now.
It's an incredibly dated teaser trailer. It's so bad.
It's just like flash cut, flash cut, flash cut, flash cut, flash cut.
It's almost enough to trigger like epilepsy in someone. Like it's really bad. It was
not good. And if I had watched that now, not knowing anything about the Avengers, I would not have wanted to go see the Avengers.
No, it was not a good representation of that film. It didn't have any of the actual money shots, basically, that you want people to see in your trailer.
Yeah.
I mean, they know to do that in a Marvel movie now. They know how to keep their little secrets. They know how to show just enough to get you in there. But with this trailer was so bad.
Flash cut. Thor looking pensive, flash cut.
I actually forgot how those trailers could actually be that poorly edited.
Oh yeah, it was not good. It was not good, and they were banking on it just being hype by itself.
Even the trailers that I've looked up from films from the 70s and the 80s, and all, mostly to show you or other people, or just to look at them myself, those trailers were all cut better than the Avengers one.
Oh, the Avengers teaser. I don't know. I haven't watched the full trailer in a very long time, but that teaser was not good. You compare that teaser to the teaser we got for Multiverse of Madness, different complete worlds.
Or even just the Age of Ultron one, which was incredibly hype-inducing for the time that it came out, because it had
the quality of the movie.
Because it had that amazing no strings on me thing, which honestly the first time
I wish that had been in the movie. We can't go on about this though. We'll be here for an hour.
I'm just saying that was a really great thing.
Yes.
And I miss it. And compare that to the Avengers
teaser trailer. Was not good.
No.
Was not good. Okay, so do you want to get back to Chris Evans?
It was like night and day, I'm telling you.
It was. It was.
Yes, and I want to get back to Chris Evans.
Okay, get back to Chris Evans.
Because I think this might have actually been the first movie that I actually noticed Chris Evans, really. I mean, for a long...
That's unfortunate for you, because America's Ass was in Not Another Teen Movie.
Well, look. Let me
But was it America's Ass yet? No, it was not.
Let me explain. For quite a while, I was solely into Lord of the Rings and anime, and that was my world, and that's all I cared about. Then when I graduated and got into college, that's when I started branching out to different movies, like to actual
Film.
Well, Lord of the Rings is film, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
Things that are not franchises.
Yes.
How about that?
Yes, like I actually started going through Scorsese's filmography, Coppola's filmography. I saw The Deer Hunter for the first time.
Hashtag film Twitter.
Which, let me tell you, is... that is a pretty rough one to get through if you have never... If you had very limited knowledge going into that movie, that is a rough one to get through. Let me just say that. And... So by the time the Avengers came out, by the time a lot of the MCU was taking off, like, Iron Man was really the first time I took notice of Robert Downey Jr.
Okay, that's fair. I hadn't
And
really...
Captain America was the first time that I really took notice of Chris Evans. And honestly, I am very glad he took the role. I think he is a perfect Steve Rogers. I honestly cannot imagine anyone else in this role.
Considering the other people who auditioned for Steve Rogers, including John Krasinski, who I don't hate, but do I buy him as Steve? No.
Well, I mean, to be fair, he actually looks pretty good as Jack Ryan nowadays. But is
that Steve Rogers? No.
I would not put him as Steve Rogers.
No.
I think Chris Evans is it's kind of like Hugh Jackman as Logan in the Wolverine. Like, you can't... I don't think you're going to be able to replicate that kind of lightning in a bottle casting.
Tom Hardy.
Well,
Tom Hardy.
Tom Hardy is a very special person. He is a very special actor. No matter what he does, he is beautiful. Like, leave me alone.
Anyway, we're not talking about Tom Hardy, though. We're talking about Chris Evans.
Because that'll take a whole nother 3 hours,
yes,
too.
We're talking about Chris Evans.
And Chris Evans... Honestly, like Robert Downey Jr., I think both of them were, like, perfect casting for their roles.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think he did a very good job in balancing his stubbornness, his sassiness. He's got softness in him. He's an absolute dweeb at times.
Oh my god, yes. Do you fondue?
He has no idea how to talk to women, but has no problem sassing his mouth off to every dude ever. Like...
Steve, you're bi, we get it. You can't say it because it's 1942, but we get it.
America's ass, indeed. I think the only qualm that I really have is the fact that in later movies we don't actually get to see as much of his
artistic.
Yes. His artistic inclinations, how much he loves to read, shit like that is introduced in this movie. It's touched on, but we don't really see it touched on much again. Like, there's a brief scene in the Avengers, sure, but we don't see it hardly at all.
The closest we get is the Winter Soldier and Steve's list of stuff, and them implying heavily that he's gotten through parts of that list, especially with their use of the music that is on said list.
Yes.
But that is really about the closest we will ever come again
to any of
Steve having a personality outside of Captain America.
Yeah, and him being more than just a soldier. He's also a man who has other interests, he has feelings, he has emotions, he actually cries and feels sad, and I appreciated a lot of that complexity actually being in this portrayal.
So are we saying basically that the thing behind Civil War, really behind Civil War, is toxic masculinity?
I mean, probably. I'm pretty sure that's a big player in that whole scenario. Even
Steve gets to have feelings. Tony's never been able to touch his feelings.
I mean, and honestly, even if you looked at the comics, you'd probably see a lot of the same shit at play. So, sure, why not?
To be fair, that is not a critique of the First Avenger. That is a critique of how they handle Steve later, which we will also get into.
Yeah, we will. We have a lot to say about Civil War, too.
As an introduction, though, I think it works really well. Everyone works really well together. There aren't parts of the cast that I feel like they didn't do enough with.
Like, there's a lot of chemistry between all the characters that need to have chemistry.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think is part of what makes it work so well as not only a cast, but as a film. Yeah. Because if your cast does not have chemistry, if you cannot get those dynamics down, then there's not going to be any emotional investment in these characters. There's not going to be any emotional investment in the story. And I think that is also, that's a favor to the cast and also a credit to the writing about how well it's actually handled. I think this is a far better MCU film than a lot of people give it credit for.
I think it's, honestly, and if we're coming back around to our assessment of this movie, really, right? I feel like this one gets overlooked because it is not the flashiest in Phase 1.
No.
Because most of the time people go straight from Iron Man to Avengers.
Yeah.
A lot of the other stuff in between gets overshadowed.
Yeah.
Hulk is kind of understandable. Thor, to be fair, and we'll get into this later as well, they've always been kind of confused as to what they want to do with Thor.
Thor is basically...
it's still a quieter movie compared to Iron Man.
Iron Man is very flashy, it's very techno-based because, you know, it's Stark. Thor, I think, is the way it is because you have a traditionally Shakespearean director coming to a comic book world.
Trying to make it extremely Shakespearean.
Yes.
Which, again, we'll get into later. We're not going to get into that today.
But I think that's why Captain America does not feel like the others, because in truth, the others, if you look at the three big ones, but sorry, we're not counting the Hulk because a lot of people
It's been so retconned by this point, it doesn't really count as one of the big three.
But if you look at the big three, Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor, none of them are the same. They're all very tonally different. They all look different visually.
Yeah, they do.
And they all have they even have different soundtracks. They have different
Yeah,
writing.
We hadn't had every Avengers movie sounds like every Avengers movie yet.
Iron Man is more of a comedy. Captain America is a bit more of an action, drama kind of. Thor has that very Shakespearean kind of quality to it.
While also being that very, like, fantasy adventure movie.
Yeah. So all the big three are very different from each other. And I think it's because, yeah, the other two are a bit more flashy. But in its own way, I think it's also because Captain America is honestly more grounded than the other two. And more of a reality. Not just because
it's extremely realistic in comparison. It's quiet.
Yeah. Except
even if you're dealing with even if you're dealing with bombs going off in a war movie, it's extremely quiet in comparison to Iron Man, which is just Tony talking constantly.
I think it's also just the fact that it's centered in World War II. It's about these guys just trying to get through the war, trying to win the war, trying to do... It's kind of a story that we've seen many times before in other war movies. It's just it has, you know...
a comic book feel to it.
Yeah, it's got superhero in
it. It is, in fact, the period piece that they played around with it not being.
Yes.
Which I think is why it gets overshadowed. Because Marvel has a very... And again, we'll get to that later, too. But Marvel has a very touch-and-go relationship with period pieces.
They really...
And how they handle history and things, but I think that this is probably the most solid effort and where it works the best.
Yeah, out of all of the times when they have done, like, the time period throwbacks, I think this one honestly works the best. It feels the most solid. It's the most grounded in its period. They get a lot of the historical details right, the fashion, the designs of the cars.
Which also looks like it came straight out of The Rocketeer.
Yes. It does.
Which helps it, I think. They both feel very much grounded in their...
Like, also even, like, all the use of the machine guns, a lot of the gangster suits, all of that. There's a lot of parallels to The Rocketeer in the... I mean,
Haley looks a lot like Jennifer Connelly, even if it's just the hairstyling. They also have that walk into the room with that stunning dress moment. Both movies center around a dance, it's just that one of them gets a dance and the other one doesn't ever. The real tragedy.
That actually is... That line he says at the end, I had a date, that hits... very hard every time by the time you get there. Exactly,
where The Rocketeer has a happier ending.
I mean, I think it helps they both take place roughly during the same time, but yeah, the similarities, though, are just because it's all done by the same director. So, and it's a Disney film, also based on a graphic novel. It's really hard not to make these comparisons when you actually watch the two, especially when we did it back to back.
Oh, I think it's important to watch them back to back, considering the director's history and how one vision feeds into another. I mean, even the plot beats were similar.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, actually, a lot of them were, and a lot of the characters resembled each other. There's this scene at the beginning of the movie where you have Terry O'Quinn as Howard Hughes, and he's talking to a general and a politician, and I'm literally like...
There's Tommy Lee Jones.
There's Howard Stark. There's the shitty senator. They're all right there. And instead of the super soldier serum, it's the rocket that everyone's trying to get. Because they even show footage later of the Germans trying to do their own failed rocket, just like in Captain America.
Well, and you have the Nazi spies, you have the actors not... I mean, again, we'll get to that later in the other Captain America, but it continues to feed through the rest of Captain America, the influence from the Rocketeer, honestly, I think. And subsequently, they cited Raiders of the Lost Ark. I feel that a little bit more in The Rocketeer than I do Captain America, but I can absolutely see where they were trying. I think that their point is that they think period piece means like 1980s, 1800s Jane Austen, BBC, Colin Firth.
It ends at the Edwardian time.
Yeah. Period piece for them means it's a Jane Austen movie. They think of Raiders of the Lost Ark as not a period piece because it's action-packed. The characters seem modern even though they're not.
Except this just in, even movies that take place in the 60s and 70s are considered period films. They're just a more modern period, guys.
Yeah.
Because, and the thing is, you have Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then you have The Rocketeer, which clearly took a lot of inspiration from the Raiders of the Lost Ark, including a dude in glasses and a black hat.
Who was a Nazi.
Who looks literally like the guy who gets his face melted off at the end of Raiders.
He also looks like the villains from Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yes,
I keep thinking that all the gangsters in that movie look exactly like... I'm like, this is a Roger Rabbit movie. Oh, I can't talk today.
And then you have Captain America, which replicates and even repeats a lot of the same stuff from The Rocketeer, has a lot of the same story beats from the Raiders, including where we see a guy literally get...
He rips his face off because he's looked into the Ark of the Covenant. That's basically what the Tesseract is.
And his face is all red.
Yeah.
Now, the same way that it got all red when other people's faces
started melting off. Well, and then you have Jennifer Connelly, who is very similar. I'd say she's functionally more similar to Marion than she is Peggy.
Yeah.
But visually, they're all very similar. Functionally, they all serve a fairly similar place in the plot.
Marion's a little rougher around the edges than the other two.
I mean, they're all different. Marion's roughness is translated more into Peggy, and the style-wise is translated more into Peggy from Jennifer Connelly. So you get little bits of each of them in Peggy.
Peggy's like both of them,
basically.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Because, like, I wouldn't say that Jenny was a one-to-one for Marion, and I wouldn't say Marion was a one-to-one for Peggy, and I wouldn't say Jenny was a one-to-one for Peggy either.
No, they're all very similar, but they're also each their own individual characters and offer different things to each movie. They bring a different kind of attitude.
They're all still the smart one at the end of the day.
Yes, they are all the smart one at the end of the day, and they all look gorgeous while doing it, so, you know... That works for me, especially Jennifer Connelly. I'm like, damn.
Girl, you were 21.
21.
Stunning James Bond in that dress. Damn, girl.
Like, we had to rewind that.
We sure did.
And also, the scene with the guy who gets his head, annihilated by a propeller. In
Captain America.
Raiders of the Lost Ark, okay, in that same scene... The camera doesn't show it. We just see, like, the blood splatter, right? In Captain America, we see a guy's whole body get annihilated into the propeller.
It's because the movie held off on all violence. Because,
like,
for a war movie, it's really bloodless.
It's that really
up until
tame.
that one point. They saved it all.
Yeah,
they saved it all for that one dude to go through the propeller.
We just see dudes
and the Red Skull pulling his face off.
Yeah, we just see dudes get literally vaporized by their rays, and then we see this guy just go through the propeller, and I did not remember that.
I sincerely cannot think of an older MCU movie, and I'm not talking like late Phase 3 or even Phase 4, because we know that they're a little more liberal with it now. But, like, early Marvel movies, I can't even recount one that has that much blood in it. Like, you'll see it on characters sometimes, like, you'll see wounds. I think the closest we get is, like, the Avengers with Coulson. But for the most part, like, you still really don't see it.
Or with Tony with, like, a car battery in his chest.
Yeah, but even that's not blood. It's, like, other goop or whatever. Like, for the most part, like, even putting a car battery into Tony's chest is bloodless in comparison to that dude going through a propeller.
Which genuinely shocked me, because I could not...
I forgot that it was there.
I did not remember that happened. That
is also very similar to that opening of The Rocketeer, where he's got all that oil going into his face as he's crashing the plane.
And he punched out the glass just so he could see. Damn, Johnston, you got me. You got me with that one. And I'll watch a lot of horror movies. I also watch a lot of violent anime and shit. And that, I was not expecting that in a Marvel movie. That really fucked me up for a second there.
Well, this one also gets surprisingly dark in ways that you don't expect otherwise as well, because for the most part, the Silvestri score fits the film. It's not anything I'm gonna write home about, but it's not awful either. Like, it works for the movie, it's fine.
It's got a pretty good theme for Cap, honestly.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. It's functional as a soundtrack. I don't really have complaints about it. But then you have the one Alan Menken composed number with David Zippel writing the lyrics for the Star-Spangled Man. And on the surface, you're like, okay, yeah, this is like an old-timey USO song, whatever. But if you actually listen to the lyrics, it's really dark. They mention, like, nooses and, like, killing people. Like, it's surprisingly dark.
And then you have literally other characters in the MCU referencing this exact song multiple times in other movies.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a surprisingly dark song when you really get into the lyrics, but that honestly shouldn't surprise anybody, because David Zippel has worked with Alan Menken before on the Hercules soundtrack.
Which also has, surprisingly, a lot of plot beats that are very similar to Captain America.
Yeah, it sure does.
Actually.
And didn't that come out in, like, 96, 97?
Yeah. I think
right about the time they were starting to concept Captain America.
Wow, imagine that, Disney using the same story beats. I can't. I'm shocked, I tell you. Shocked.
Okay, so, if you were to give Captain America an all-over rating, like if you're putting it on Letterboxd, what is your rating for this movie going to be?
4 out of 5.
4 out of 5.
Yeah. I mean, I only do that because there are times when sometimes the pacing feels a bit slow. Sometimes, I don't know. I kind of wish it would be a little tighter. That's the only reason. Otherwise, I think it's a very solid movie. It's one of those Marvel movies that I do genuinely like rewatching. And I forget how much I enjoy it when I do watch it. So it does have a lot of rewatchability. It is mostly a standalone movie. It's got a lot of really good performances. The production value is very good. But like you said, the score isn't as good as it could be. But yeah, sometimes the pacing gets a bit slow for me. Those are really the only complaints that I actually have.
I agree. I think I had it at a 4.5. I hadn't actually rated it on Letterboxd before, and I've seen this movie a lot. But for the most part, this used to be the Captain America I avoided watching. Mm-hmm. Even though I love World War II movies, and I could never pinpoint why I did that, other than The Winter Soldier being just...
The Winter Soldier
Chef kiss.
Is such a good movie.
It is. It's stunning. It is a sequel that is far away superior to the original, but we'll get there later.
Yeah.
But for the most part, like, if I'm comparing it to something that I see as functionally perfect, yeah, it's gonna kind of feel like a bummer in comparison. But if you're watching it all by itself,
It's still very
I
good
didn't
movie.
really have all that many complaints about it. Yeah, it does kind of get slow in some parts. I wish that we'd spend a little less time with scrawny Steve. As much as I get the story functionality of it, the movie is at least 2 hours long. It's really long, and it feels its length sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's not purely because of the setting, because, again, I love World War II movies.
Yeah.
But there are parts of it that really just kind of... I don't want to say get into the weeds, because we've seen that with Marvel movies, and this isn't it. It's just a little... There are some things that they could probably cut out and just refine it a little bit.
It feels a little draggy sometimes.
Yeah.
There are some of the quieter moments really land, like Erskine's talk with Steve really lands.
That's so sweet. His
There-
Uncle Ben speech.
Yes. And then there are some moments that kind of feel a bit too long. Some of the pace, like I said, some of the pacing just feels kind of draggy. It's not the whole film. The music, like you said, I agree. It has a good theme for Cap, but overall, I feel like
the music is kind of like a lot of like middling Hans Zimmer stuff. It's Hans Zimmer. It's not bad, but is it like
memorable?
No, not really. It's fine. It functions. It's not awful. It's not one of those soundtracks that you hear that and you're like, what were you even thinking?
It's not like the Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack, which you immediately are like, yes.
Nothing is the Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack. They've tried to do this time and time again, and nothing is that unless it's not a Marvel movie.
Pretty much. But overall, out of all the Phase 1 origin of MCU Phase 1 origin films that we get, I still think Captain America, the First Avenger, is a very solid movie. I think it's a very solid origin movie. And also, while it feels like an origin movie, it also feels a bit more than that. It feels like a worthwhile story to tell, if that makes sense.
Well, and we'll see this later with other Marvel origin movies, of which there are many. A lot of them try and take all of their cues from Iron Man.
Yeah.
And I feel like this one is different enough that it doesn't quite feel like the MCU has hit that formula over and over again.
It also didn't have, like, the beam in the sky, really. It just had a plane in the sky.
That's fair. It also doesn't have enough Joss Whedon influence in it that I can see it.
Thank God.
Which, again, we'll get to later.
We will get to it.
So you left it at a 4, I left it at a 4.5.
Yeah.
So I think that's all we have left to say about Cap. So thanks for listening to our first episode of FANSPLAINED. We'll be releasing episodes weekly, and while we plan on addressing a variety of fandoms and franchises, we'll be catching up on an extended rewatch of the MCU and the full multiverse. Next week, we'll be discussing both the Agent Carter one-shot short film as well as season 1 of the Agent Carter television show. You can find our updates here on YouTube as well as on Twitter at FANSPLAINED. If you enjoyed our episode, we would appreciate it if you could Hulk smash that like button. And if you want more of our conversations on the MCU and other fandoms, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell for new episodes. Until next time, Salt Shakers, this has been Ryan.
This is M.
With FANSPLAINED. See you next week.